Hello, family members. I hope you're having a nice day today. Today, I want to talk to you about something that I've actually touched on before, uh, but it was a really old video. I don't think probably anybody who's watching videos now has watched. And I want to talk about hunting because, well, the average person has like no familiarity with that whatsoever, and there's a lot of misconceptions. So I think it's worth addressing. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about is how hunters, by their licenses, support conservation of environments. A lot of people aren't aware of that, but some of the animal populations that we have in the United States, we have them because of hunters, not the other way around. Now, don't get me wrong, in the early days of colonial America and such, people hunted far too excessively and did put many species on the brink of extinction, or, even did some species did go extinct. And that was because of unregulated hunting. What we have today, though, is fairly regulated. And it's actually very beneficial to the environment in that the regulated hunting is done in such a way that they make sure that they maintain populations. If a population isn't thriving, then you're not going to be able to safely take from the population without diminishing it. And so, you know, the amount of, say, more unique species will be limited as far as hunting goes, whereas animals that are invasive or are having excess population, people can be encouraged to hunt and sort of put that back in a more beneficial equilibrium. And one thing that is a consequence of early hunting is that in the United States we have a real deficiency of predator animals. Wolves basically are completely eradicated throughout most of the United States. And so animal populations like deer, for example, can grow out of proportion because their natural predator isn't available to control the population the way that it would have prior to Europeans coming to this land and doing all the fun stuff that they did, right? So, and an overpopulation of, say, deer is bad for deer in that there's not enough food to go around, and so they would likely, a lot of them starve. It also makes it easier for there to be issues with like disease, and so it's good to kind of to thin the herd out in a responsible way, and that's what most, like, say, deer hunting regulations are meant to do. And then, of course, from a human perspective, it's also beneficial in that we don't want to have so many deer that people run into them with their cars all the time. An excess population of deer can be quite dangerous. People don't realize that deer can and do attack and harm humans. And so, I mean, most of them don't. Most of them are fine. I like deer a lot, don't get me wrong, but it's important for their population to be managed. And our regulations that we have, our hunting regulations, help us do that. So, then the other thing about it that they don't realize, I think, a lot of the time, is that not so much here in the United States, but overseas, there's a lot of places where big game hunting operations are used to fund conservation efforts and anti-poaching efforts. And so while people really hate the idea of, say, a Cecil the lion getting hunted. What it cost for that person to hunt that cat legally is going to be something that is used by that local economy and used to support the population. There's the two types of incentives there. The incentive, the direct incentive, like licensure and, whatever sort of taxes, fees, things like that the government gets directly. But there's also then an economic value placed on a healthy living population of whatever animal. And that makes it more likely that the local people are going to be invested in that population staying healthy. If your local economy is based on having tourists come in to do big game hunting, then you're going to be pretty anti-poacher, because poachers are going to be taking away one of your community's resources, And I know that there's a lot of people that that's not going to be enough. But in the real world where we live, giving people an economic incentive to maintain wild animal populations is extremely important. The economic incentives have often been that you clear the land and you use it for lumber or farming or, whatever it is that is, mining. And all of those are very short term. The value that you can get from the land that way is finite, or it is without very careful management. Farming strips the soil of nutrients, and so you have to have fertilizer and irrigation and all sorts of things. And the same thing with lumber. Even if you do a tree plantation, that takes a long time and takes a lot of resources. And if you make that land more valuable as natural ecology, as a place for animal populations to exist, to thrive, so that you can then support either ecotourism or big game hunting or just hunting, then it's going to change that incentive structure. I think that people have a tendency to forget that humans are really driven by incentives. If something is not incentivized, then it's very likely to be neglected, ignored, or completely eradicated. And so, allowing legal hunting allows for governments to create positive incentive structures that will impact the environment in a positive way, instead of letting corporations create whatever incentive structures they want that probably aren't going to have any sort of long-term benefit to the land at all. People don't realize that every single person who goes out duck hunting has to buy a duck stamp, and the money that duck stamp costs goes to preserving wetlands in the United States. And wetlands are extremely fragile ecologies, and they are really at risk because, we have all of this industrial farming, so we have all of this agricultural runoff. That's a huge problem here in Florida. And one of the things that they did is there's a place called Lake Apopka, and it used to be the bass fishing capital of the world or whatever. But there was so much agricultural runoff around the lake that it became just completely polluted. And so what they've done is the northern shore of it has been reclaimed and made into an animal refuge that you can actually go drive through. It's really, I mean, if you're in the Orlando-ish area and you want to see wild alligators, that's where you should go, 100%, is the Lake Apopka Wildlife Drive. But what's amazing about that is that it benefits all of these different populations to reclaim those wetlands. And it also has made the lake better. And that helps with, say, tourism, fishery management, all sorts of things. And so it all kind of ties together. People who love to hunt, like my dad, are very, very invested in the health of the environment. My dad even goes as far, every year he goes out and plants like 40 acres worth of wildlife plots. Basically, you know, he goes and tills and plants so that deer and birds and other animals have food to eat. He goes out and specifically puts the kind of foods that bird populations need that are sort of on the, you know, low side in West Virginia, to try to encourage the, you know, population to grow. And he's motivated to do that because of his love of hunting, because he knows that he can't go hunting unless there's a healthy population of the birds he'd like to hunt. And so whether or not you like the idea of hunting, it is important to understand that there are people who do, and the people who do love it are going to probably engage in that behavior no matter what we do. And so might as well make it so that we have a good system set up to incentivize responsible harvesting of animals and responsible use of land. You know, there are wonderful, wonderful places in the world that are more or less animal refuges that are hunting leases. And, you know, like a whole group of people come together and lease out the hunting rights for a bit of land that some corporation isn't currently using. And they're going to be incentivized to make sure that that land is a good place for animals to thrive. And I know that my dad's been on hunting leases in West Virginia. I know that they exist down here too, in Florida, and I'm sure they're just all everywhere, you know. And it's a more complicated topic than people want to think it is, you know. You kind of see like cartoonish hunting thing where like people have furs everywhere and blah, 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 blah. No, I don't think that's the majority. I mean, I think a lot of people that are hunters do just hunt, say, a deer once a year, or, you know, occasionally go out and do a hunt or whatever. But the truly dedicated hobbyist hunters like my dad, that'll go out like every free day that they can during hunting season, they're the ones who notice their problems with the environment, and they're the ones that are sort of the eyes and ears of scientists and governments in tracking populations. You know, they're probably going to be the first people to notice if a population is there in excess, and if it's there in if it's not there, you know. Like, it's really an important thing to remember that humans are part of the world. We're part of the environment. You know, there's this idea that we're completely separate. Like, there's the natural world and the human world. And that's not true, you know. we affect our environment and our environment affects us, and we are part of the environment. And far too often people want to sort of impose their desires on the environment, and maybe do so recklessly without thinking about the broader environment. And when we do that, we hurt ourselves as much as anything else, you know? I have a very strong affinity for urban animals. You know, being as I live here in the suburbs, and I have quite a nice array of wildlife that I've observed in my own yard. Everything from like anoles and various snakes to like bald eagles and woodpeckers and every kind of bird you can probably think of. You know, I see raccoons, I've seen rabbits, you know, all sorts of things, gopher tortoises, other types of turtles. It's amazing, you know, how much wildlife there is everywhere. And part of the reason why I've seen so much of it is, number one, I'm looking, but number two, we put out bird feeders. And so that helps support the bird population. And we also grow, you know, different gardens and different things that are good habitat for the anoles. All these foundational species that support all of the other species in the food chain. And that's something that I know how to do because of hunting. You know, I'm not a hunter myself. I don't like shooting guns. Just not something I enjoy. And I don't know that I would really want to shoot animals. That's not necessarily my thing, but, you know, honestly, I think it's more humane than eating chicken from the grocery store, you know. Like the birds that lived in the wild that my dad's hunted had a much better life than the ones that lived in those factory farms, right? So there's that. But, you know, I feel like there's a lot of resistance to hunting because it's seen as sort of primitive, you know, like hunter-gatherer kind of society. And quite frankly, that hunting instinct is just an innate part of human existence. Some people have it, some people don't. But it is a part of us, and it's not necessarily a bad thing for people who feel called to engage in that activity, to engage in it, assuming they do so in a responsible way. And we have really good incentive structures in the United States to encourage our hunters to hunt responsibly within the law. And places where that is happening worldwide, there's a benefit to the wider environment. So that's what I wanted to talk about. And I got socks hair on my nose. I was trying not to wet. I'm sorry, I can't help it. Well, I hope you have a nice day, family members. My daddy will be here later on, and I'm sure he'll tell me all about going turkey hunting. And I'll pretend to care. But it means a lot to him, and you know, I love the environment, and I love hearing about his adventures in it. So that's part of my life that I wanted to share with you. Bye.